Okay, this account comes from The Message by Lance Richardson. It occurred up in Idaho, and I will just read, excuse me about the chair, I'll just read. Mark raced down the hall to obtain help for me. I turned my head and looked at the oxygen gauge to see if it was running full force. It was. I remember turning to look to my doorway to see if anyone was coming to help. That was the last thing I saw before everything suddenly went blank. Now remember, we're talking about leaving the body, crossing over into the other realm. Pitch black. A thicker, darker blackness I had never seen. It seemed as if it came from nowhere, yet immediately filled everywhere and everything. I could see nothing, and this is all transpired so quickly that I was taken completely by surprise. My immediate thought was, who turned off the lights? I stood and began to walk into this palpable darkness towards where I thought must be the light switch. I put my arms directly in front of me and pushed forward, feeling to the right, then left, to find the switch. I suddenly realized that I was walking under my own power, and curiously, there was no more pain. Just a moment before I was wrenching in agony, and now I felt nothing. Nothing but thick, inky darkness. As I stepped forward, I pushed outward into the darkness and brushed against something. It felt much like a thin veil or a curtain. As I parted the substance, an intense light filled with warmth and love fell upon me and beckoned me forward. It was a brilliant light that immediately dispersed all the darkness about me. It was soothing and satisfying. It carried a peace that I wanted to embrace. Deep inside me it felt somehow familiar. A feeling from deep within that was sweet to my soul. I stepped forward into the light. Though as yet I had not come to a realization of where I was, I instantly perceived I was entering into a most magnificent dimension or sphere, which far surpassed the beauty of any place I had ever visited. The peace was consuming and the beauty transcending. Where am I? I thought to myself. What has happened to me? Wasn't I just fighting for my life? An awareness of my true location was suddenly permeating my mind. I suddenly felt anxious, not knowing what I might see or what might happen. Immediately in front of me stretched a lush lawn of emerald hue, yet mixed with a combination of sky blue. I had never seen such a vibrant, brilliant color. Trees could be seen in numerous places around the landscape. They too were much more impressive than anything I had ever seen. Leaves and sprigs carried varieties of colors such as crimson, gold, blazing yellow, on fire, shades of green and blue, and deep blood red. One stem may have numerous flowers of different varieties and colors. These flowers and shrubbery cast soft and deep tones of warmth and splendor, as if mixed by a master painter. I was enthralled with the beauty which encompassed me. Before me, scattered around the lawn and trees, were numerous people grouped in small clusters, some sitting together under trees, reading and having discussions, others grouped in intent discourse, thought. Suddenly I felt someone approaching me from behind. I turned to find the faces of some of my closest relatives. In the front of the group was my cousin, Randy McMillan, who had died nearly 20 years earlier from leukemia. He looked great. He had been a state champion wrestler in high school and had continued his wrestling career in college. He had been full of life and ready to take on the world when he contracted this deadly disease and died. His stature now, however, was every bit as powerful as I had ever remembered him appearing. Definitely not the sickly young man that I had known at his death. And his keen sense of humor appeared to be every bit intact. He stepped toward me and greeted me with a warm embrace. Okay, that's The Message by Lance Richardson, and I have just read pages 50, 51, and 52. This next book, I Saw Heaven by Lawrence E. Tooley. And this is three quotes about crossing to the other side that I have put together because they are a similar topic. I quote, and this is starting on page 55. I lay on my side after hitting the floor. He fell from a scaffolding. He was working in some kind of a warehouse or a building, and the scaffolding collapsed. And this is in the previous pages. I lay on my side after hitting the floor. I couldn't feel any pain. In fact, I couldn't feel anything. My first thought was, where is everyone? I knew other people had been working in the warehouse, but I couldn't see them. I looked around. Several large overhead bay drawers were opened, and I could see the sunlight filtering through the haze. I also could see the foreman's office lined with glass windows and various support columns located throughout the warehouse. I was confused as I began to lift off the floor and rose to an upright position. It was then I sensed that I had died and was no longer inside my body. I was facing away from my body at the time and felt no desire to turn and look back at it. As I looked about, everything had a light green cast, and I felt as though I were looking at everything through a light green fog. It was the kind of a fog that seemed to pervade everything. I was still feeling confused and bewildered as I began rising toward the ceiling. The closer I got to the ceiling, the thicker and darker the mist became, until at ceiling height it was as if I were standing in a very thick fog. It was as thick and foreboding as some of the worst fogs I had ever experienced while standing on the beaches in California, except this was far more mournful and desolate. As I looked around, there seemed to be an endless sea of agonized souls floating in the fog. As some of them passed close by me, I could hear them moaning and groaning. The fog was so thick I could only make out their dim outlines. Their pain and grief washed over me. I was experiencing the uttermost feelings of the depths of despair, the overpowering feelings of frustration and misery. I felt seeped into me with a cold that chilled my very soul. I was racked with terrible torment and anguish. The feelings were suffocating me. My God, I screamed, is this hell? I can't stand it. Please, God, help me. I pleaded with God to save me. I understood now what the scriptures mean when they talk about being cast out into outer darkness. and that the damned who are sent there moan and groan and thrash about and gnash their teeth because of their eternal despair. I'm now skipping over to page 59 and continuing. I found I had re-entered the spirit world as I had the physical world, naked. Two men, both dressed in white robes, helped me put on a white robe-like garment. As I adjusted the hem in the back, they left, disappearing into an office at the end of the hall. Now, remember, we're skipping several pages here. I looked up as I completed adjusting the hem of my robe. To the right of the doorway through which I had entered was a large desk. An old man with a long white beard, wearing the same type of robe-like garment the others had worn, was seated at the desk. He was writing in a large book. Without moving from my position, I could see. It was my name he was writing. I could also see the names of two other men he had recorded just before mine, and the name of a woman who apparently had entered before them. These were the names of people who had crossed over just before I had. Now, as I skip forward to pages 82 and 83, Larry Lawrence had a friend who had accidentally hung himself. He was very short, and he was somehow given the concept that if he would stretch himself, he could get taller. And so he rigged up a rope with a noose in it and a chair in his apartment and was trying to stretch himself. The chair slipped and he hung himself accidentally. And so when the author, Lawrence Tooley, goes into the spirit world after his collapse, he's met by his friend who's also named Larry. And so now we're engaged in a discussion between the two of these. Page 82 and 83. Again, leaving the body, crossing through the veil. Larry again took me by the hand, and we rose, moving away, crossing some low, tree-lined hills. It wasn't long before we settled onto a well-groomed street, where large trees that looked like huge oaks lined the streets on either side. As we walked side by side down the street, Larry began talking to me. "What happened to me," said Larry, "was the result of my foolish actions. I hadn't anticipated the consequences of what I was doing." "I was told it was an accident," I said to him. "I put the pieces together and concluded that you must have bumped your head, knocked yourself unconscious." "That's right. That's just what happened," he said. "After you left me that morning, I tried to stretch myself again. The chair I used to stand on had a short leg that made it rock slightly. After I slipped the noose under my chin, the chair rocked because of that short leg, startling me. I overreacted, and that caused the chair to flip out from under me. I fell backwards, hitting my head against the door. It knocked me out. When I bounced from the noose forward, the noose slipped over my head. It was too late to do anything. In a few moments, I was dead." I stopped and looked at Larry. "What was it like?" I asked. When I heard what had happened, I couldn't believe it. I took it pretty hard. That was all still so new to me. I was looking for some kind of comparison to my own experience. "Did you go through the same thing I did when you died?" I asked. "Yes, I did," he said. After I died, I just looked at my body for a long time. I felt remorseful at first. I didn't know how to handle it. When I was finally admitted into the receiving room in the spirit world, where I met you, I was taken on a tour, just like the one that I'm taking you on. Were you met by someone you knew too? I asked. Yes, he said. Everyone is. It makes the transition easier that way. I didn't ask who his guide was. I felt I would be prying into an area that would be too personal. I grappled with my feelings. There were so many unanswered questions. I needed time to sort through my emotions and digest what was happening to me. This situation shouldn't be this hard to understand, should it? I asked. Larry sensed what I was feeling. It isn't only at first. When your memory completely returns, you'll be able to understand it all. You'll see the perfect logic and harmony in all of this. So two friends meet together in the spirit world. And I concluded that quote on page 83. This book, The Boy Who Came Back from Heaven, by Kevin and Alex Malarkey. They were in a car accident. And this is the boy's account of what he saw as he and his father both died. Daddy did not see the car coming, but I did. I liked to look out the backside window of Daddy's car, and so that is what I was doing when we started to turn. I was just getting ready to tell him that there was a car coming when we got hit. For just 1 second before all of the action began, there was a moment of calmness. I remembered thinking someone was going to die. When the calm ended, I heard the sound of glass breaking, and I saw Daddy's feet going out of the car. Now I thought I knew who was going to die, but then I saw something unbelievably cool. 5 angels were carrying Daddy outside the car. 4 were carrying his body, and 1 was supporting his neck and head. The angels were big and muscular, like wrestlers, and they had wings on their backs, from their waist to their shoulders. I thought Daddy was dead, but that it was okay because the angels were going to make him okay. Then I looked to the front passenger seat, and the devil was looking into my eyes. He said, "Yeah, that's right. Your daddy is dead, and it's your fault." I thought the accident was my fault because I had asked Daddy a question, and he turned to answer my question right before the car hit us. I'm not sure whether I watched Daddy from the car or from heaven. I went to heaven shortly after the car hit us, but I am not sure of the exact moment I actually left my body. I do know that when I was in heaven, everything was perfect. This is what happened in the car after the other car hit us. All of this happened in what seemed to be a few seconds. I heard the sound of shattering glass, and I tried to duck my head to protect myself. As I ducked down, I saw a piece of glass in my thumb. That is when I realized that all of this was real. I tried to bite down on Barney. I felt a pain in my mouth, like maybe I had bitten through my tongue. I began to feel pain throughout my body. I thought that I would be the next one to die. I thought that there was some fire behind me because my back felt like it was burning. I tried to turn my head toward the back of the car, but there was no fire. I could only see a big black circle, and something smelled really nasty. I felt a bad pain in the back of my head. It felt like a knife stabbing my neck. Then I realized that my head was hanging down to one side, and I could not lift it back up. I tried to call out to my daddy, but I couldn't hear the sound of my voice. I thought maybe my hearing wasn't working. Then I thought the sound of the car hitting us was echoing in my head. With my lips I said, "I love you, Daddy." I thought the roof of the car was going to collapse on me. I felt like I was in a plane that was flying on the road. It sounded like a volcano was erupting and coming my way. I saw the 2 airbags blow up. Daddy flew out of the window right before the airbags came out. The window on the passenger side in the front of the car broke. The back seat was torn up by flying glass. There was glass in my right hand, in my left armpit, in my hair, and in my private place. I knew my eyebrow was cut because blood was dripping down. I knew I was bleeding in my throat, my nose, and my eyes. I felt like I was bleeding in my stomach too, from the seat belt. The fireman cut my seat belt off because it was jammed. They put something in my throat to make me breathe. While I was on the stretcher, they told me to be strong. They said that I was hurt badly and that I was going to the hospital. They said I was a tough boy. I went through a long white tunnel that was very bright. I didn't like the music in the tunnel. It was really bad music, played on instruments with really long strings. But then I got to heaven, and there was powerful music, and I loved it. When I arrived in heaven, the same 5 angels who had helped Daddy out of the car were there. They comforted me. Daddy was in heaven too. The angel stayed with me so Daddy could be alone with God. Daddy had bad injuries like mine, but God was healing him in heaven to bring glory to himself. That's what God told me later. Daddy asked God if he could trade places with me, but God said no. God said he would heal me later on earth to bring more glory to his name. After God said no to Daddy, Daddy's spirit returned to his body next to our smashed car. I could see Daddy from heaven lying in the ditch next to our car. Children make things like this up? I don't believe it's possible. This book, Glimpses of Eternity, by Arvin S. Gibson. And I am reading page 138 and 139. It's a military story. I got stationed in Washington, D.C. in 1943 in communications. I was running a decoding machine and it was boring. I wanted to be an aviation mechanic. I put in for the necessary military school, but it turned out my tested mechanical aptitude was too low, so they didn't accept me. They had taken me out of the secret decoding work, and the only place they had available was the mess hall. After finding out that I really had a brain, to be put in the mess hall just did me in. I was so furious that I decided I was getting out of the service. Back in those days, you didn't get out easily. I tried to think of ways to get out, and I finally came up with the idea of not eating. My not eating campaign started on Christmas Day. I went through the line and didn't pick up any food. Someone noticed, and they sent me to the captain's office. He asked me what I was doing. I told him I was mad at the Navy and I wanted out. I informed him that I wouldn't eat. He sent me to the doctor and she gave me a bottle of pink medicine. I later threw it out and continued my non-eating campaign. I didn't eat for 14 days. On the 11th day, after I finished my duty with the Spuds, I was walking back to my bunk, and as I passed a cinder block wall, all of a sudden, within the snap of a finger, I found myself high above my body. My body continued to walk below me. Naturally, I went into shock. I never had experienced anything like that. I had never even heard of it. It took me at least a minute to get hold of myself. In the meantime, my body kept right on walking below me. When I got hold of myself, I figured I had to do something about it. I thought, I just can't stay up here in the air with my body below me. I came down to my body, which was walking, and I hovered in front of it. As I hovered there with my body walking toward me, I studied the head and shoulders to try and figure out a way to return to my body. I almost despaired because I couldn't see any way to get back in. Suddenly, like the snap of a finger, I was back. That's all there was to it. Question: how do you feel when you were out? I asked. This is Aaron Gibson. Light, very light. I didn't look around or anything when I was out. I was in shock. I was stunned. I just couldn't believe that that was where I was. I wanted out of the Navy, not out of my body. Did you hear any voices or anything of that sort? No, nobody was around. I just see the cinder block wall below me, the sidewalk and the landscape. Did you have a feeling of peace? If I did, I didn't notice. How long were you out? 2 minutes at the most, maybe 3. And your body was walking along during this period? I could see it. It didn't miss a step. I apparently had control of it, but I didn't know how. When you got back in, did you have any ill effects? No, within 3 days I stopped my diet. When the Navy agreed to let me out with an honorable discharge. You got out of the Navy then? No, I decided to stay in. I guess all I wanted was my own way. I stayed in and served my 1.5 years. Has that out-of-body experience affected your thinking? Well, I know that it's no big deal to get out of your body, and I've read a lot of books on the subject since the experience happened. I also know that the person that is you is the spirit inside of your body. So you believe it was just a spirit that was out? Oh yes. And you think your experience was real, not a dream or anything like that? It was no dream. You don't dream while you're walking down the street. Do you think there is a life after death? You bet I do. I don't even think, I know. And there is a God? Do you have any message to leave for others? I'm not one to advise other people, but I think what we do here is pretty important. Next, out of body. Heavenly Answers for Earthly Questions by Joyce H. Brown. Fascinating book. From my viewpoint, a major portion of this experience is the detail that Joyce goes into in sharing her life review and what she has learned from it. There are very few books out on the market dealing with near-death experiences that have more, how should I say it, more teaching and more opportunities for us to learn about the life review. This is a great book. They're all great books. Okay, but we're talking about leaving the spirit world. A few days later, I felt weaker and more ill than ever. I was alone that day. As the morning wore on, I continued to feel much worse. I began worrying and thought, I can't die yet. I'm not quite ready. And this is on page 65 that I'm beginning chapter 7. I wanted to pray, but was too weak to kneel on my own. The bedroom was large and attractive with an ivory marbled tub and white lace shower curtains. I decided I would use the edge of the bathtub to lean on. I managed to get into the bathroom even though the pain in my body was intense, and I had lost most of my strength. Supporting myself by leaning over the side of the tub, I maintained a reverent posture as I could to pray. I wanted to pray for just enough strength to finish a few critical tasks before I died. I bowed my head in prayer, but before I was able to formally ask, I heard a voice as distinct and clear as if the speaker were standing directly above me. The voice said powerfully, "If you come now." With that, my strength left me and I slumped forward, and the air went out of me as I felt a sinking heaviness in my body. With a swoosh up and outward, I left my body and found myself behind and slightly elevated from my body, my feet not touching the floor. I felt weightlessness, and the physical pain was gone. I had thought that when people die, they went through a tunnel away from the world with its challenges and its problems to the beautiful, happy place I had heard about. But I did not. I was shocked that death and dying was not what I had expected it to be. The room seemed to have no limitations to my view as I looked up, around, and then down. Looking down, my attention focused on my body slumped lifelessly over the tub. Immediately I noticed the difference between seeing myself from the mirror's flat surface to observing my body shape as another person could see it, including a total view from the back. Looking around, I realized that my sight was not limited to the use of my eyes. I could see 360 degrees around me. I had always thought of vision as occurring in the one direction that I focused on, but I could see behind me and in front of me as well as above me. In this sphere, there was sort of an instant visual awareness of everything around me. I felt wispy, almost transparent. I was aware that I could go through a wall and my hand could go through anything. I was also very aware of my limitations without my body. The knowledge was just simply there. Anything I had not said while on earth would remain unsaid. Anything I had not written while on the earth would not be written. I could not pick up anything, not even a piece of paper. It is difficult to describe what happened next. Events did not slowly progress from one phase to another as they had when I was alive on earth. Everything seemed to be happening almost instantaneously. Consequently, it is difficult to separate the experiences into periods of time or to differentiate it into stages. The other side's dimension and my experience there were as a whole, spelled with a W. Like a hologram, God's universe was complete. It was magnificent, beyond belief, and absolutely beyond earthly description. Vast knowledge and immeasurably deep feelings relating to my own personal development accompanied everything I experienced on the other side. This was the most vivid personal experience I have ever known. I have struggled to find the right words to share this marvelous yet extremely anguishing experience. End of quote. Page 67. Again, I remind you that all of the books that I am reading from are connected, linked is the word, linked to Amazon. And of course I would encourage you to create a library of your own, because there is no way that exploring near-death-experiences.com can provide that for you. Okay, the final quote, paragraphs in this lecture, discussion, reading, I don't know what people want to call them, sharing, comes from Visions of Glory, and the author is John Pontius. I begin my reading on page 4 and will go to page 7. You're going to, if you stick with me, and if the results are positive about this little experience that we're doing together, you're going to hear me say this dozens and dozens of times. It's true. It's from my heart. It's from my head. It's from my soul. This is a great book. It has some great insights. Now, there's part of it that are frustrating to me, but I doubt that we will even get into the last part of that. But he gives us some tremendous insights as he leaves his body and explores the hospital. Okay, I'm starting my quote on page 4. We arrived at the clinic a little early to fill out paperwork. I had to come fasting. We sat in the waiting room, listening for my name to be called. Before the procedure began, I changed into a hospital gown. I was escorted to a narrow metal table and told to lie face up. There were tubes and bottles of liquid dangling above my head. The room was painted hospital green. A big black X-ray machine dominated the far wall. The floor was green concrete with a black border. The walls were painted matching colors. It was a typical 1970s hospital procedure room. I'll interject here. This experience did not happen to John Pontius. There's a man who desired to keep his name out of the public view, and so he takes upon him the name of Spencer. And this book is actually Spencer sharing his 3 out-of-body near-death experiences, and John Pontius is assisting him in writing the book. Okay, I return, quote, I was feeling fearful of the procedure but thought it necessary, so I submitted as the nurse started the IV. She was young, blonde, and attractive. I assumed she was in her mid-30s. I liked her friendliness, cheerfulness, and confidence. We spoke about the procedure and possible complications. She explained some of the possible symptoms of an allergic reaction to the dye as she carefully injected the dye into my arm. She said, if you feel flush, at that very second I began to feel flush. She continued, if you feel your skin itching, as I began to itch severely all over my body. She said, if you feel pressure in your chest or feel like you can't breathe, just as I felt a horrible crushing feeling in my chest as if an elephant had sat on me. I tried to say, I can't breathe, but I couldn't get the words out. I raised my free arm and hand to my neck and quickly drew them across my throat, trying to get the nurse to realize that I was in trouble. I grabbed my throat in what I thought was the universal sign of choking. It was at that moment that the nurse comprehended my cues and realized something was seriously wrong. She ran to the next wall and pushed a large red button, the near wall, I'm sorry. A buzzer went off loudly and a recorded voice from the clinic's PA began repeating, code blue, room 24, code blue, room 24. Having worked in the hospital for many years, I had responded to such a call many times, never anticipating someday I would be the subject of such an announcement. The next thing I knew, my spirit was sinking down through the table. I had my eyes wide open, not wanting to miss any part of this experience, and I just felt my spirit sink until I could see the underside of the table. I didn't want to be under the table, and in an instant I found myself standing beside the procedure table, looking at my lifeless body stretched out before me. The large black and white clock on the wall right before me read 9:20 a.m. The nurse tried to find a pulse and couldn't. She swore and shouted back at the control room, I'm losing him! I'm losing him! A male technician rushed into the room. Immediately, people assembled to try and revive me. A doctor I had not seen before ran into the room, and for some reason, I immediately knew that he was having an affair with the nurse who started the IV. It came as a complete surprise to me that I knew this. I found my mind full of new information that was coming at me more from my heart than from my usual senses. I also knew that this nurse was recently divorced. I knew how much she valued and also feared this relationship with the doctor who was now working beside her to save me. I knew how hard she struggled to be good at her profession and still be a good mom to her 2 sons at home. I knew she had terrible financial problems. I knew everything about her. Actually, every detail of her life and every decision, fear, hope, and action that had created her life. I could hear her mind screaming in fear. She was praying for help, trying to take control of her fear and remember her training. She desperately did not want me to die. I looked at the other people in the room and was astonished that I could hear their thoughts and know the details about their lives just as vividly as the nurse. There is a heightened spiritual sensitivity that comes from being dead that I had never anticipated or heard of before. I knew what everyone was thinking. Actually, it was greater than just knowing what they were thinking. I also knew every detail of their lives. I knew they were good people or bad people, if they were honest or corrupt. I knew every act that had brought them to that state. It wasn't something I felt or could see, it was just knowledge that was in me. What was even more interesting to me was that I felt no judgment upon them. I simply knew these things. It was like knowing a rose is red. It isn't something to judge. It's just the way the flower is. What I did feel, which was totally new to me, was a rich compassion for them and their circumstances. Since I knew so much about them, I also knew their pains and their motivation for everything they had done that had taken them to this moment in time. I also felt their fear of losing me. Their actions and reactions were calculated, forcing them to remain calm. Only the doctor working on me felt a sort of detachment that allowed him to act with less emotion. Feeling their fear and the full impact of their lives caused me to experience their pains almost as keenly as they felt it. And I had total compassion for them. I did not feel fear for myself up till then. I was too busy coming to terms with all of these new sensations. I found myself standing a little farther away. I think I had stepped back a little to give them room to work on my body because they were walking or running through the same space where I had been standing. I must be dead, I remembered thinking. I had to think this process over a few times before it really sunk in. I am dead! It finally hit me as I saw my body on the table, me in a new body form standing above it in complete comfort and with no pain. Just moments ago, I was in the greatest pain I had ever been, that I had ever before felt, and now I was completely free from all pain and the cares of the tabernacle of the flesh. They were now gone. It was such a relief that discovering I was dead didn't cause any great distress. I just accepted that I was dead because I was looking at my body there on the table. I was standing there watching all of these people trying to revive me. They were shouting commands and demands and injecting me with many life-restoring substances. The next awareness I had was that I was able to comprehend many things simultaneously. I didn't need to focus on any one thing because they were all clear to my understanding. I felt like I could understand limitless amounts of knowledge and focus upon an infinite number of matters, giving each my absolute attention. This was amazing to me and so different from any experience as a struggling graduate student trying to memorize volumes of information. End of quote. It's on page 7, so I'll give you some teasers. Page 4 through 7. Later this man goes into a room, and perhaps I'll share this, but he goes into the room through the wall into the doctor's office, and there has some experiences with the ottoman, the chairs, the desk, items in the bookshelf, etc., etc., and they communicate to him how unpleased they are because they had to participate in and witness this sexual affair between the doctor and the nurse that we just read about. Very intriguing. Anyway, that's just the beginning of his tour through the hospital. Okay, so we will end this sharing. This is my cue card for my webmaster who's going to do the editing. So I have to hold this up so he knows. And I put it down. And I will see you again.